Hello, everybody. We are back. We are back for another reading of our beautiful book club. Be Holy, for I Am Holy book club. And our book that we're reading still, and we're going to be reading it for a while because we're not even halfway done with it. It's 2,000 pages.
We're almost a quarter of the way done, though.
Almost a quarter. It's our beautiful visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich. And her visions are just little tidbits here and there that we didn't know. She actually had visions of things and stories that happened to Jesus and Bible stories.
And it helps me learning about their personalities. It helps me in my rosary every time I do uh, um the mysteries of the presentation, the fourth mystery in the joyful about Simeon. Now I like every time I do that mystery, I see him
you
come in.
remember Simeon. Well, I remember when, little tidbits like that. Like I remember when Jesus is hanging on the cross at the last station, and the thief next to him tells him, can you remember me when you go into your kingdom?
Oh, I gotta remember that one. You're right.
I'm thinking, of course he's going to remember you. He saved your life when you were a baby, only with his water, with his bath water, remember?
Yeah, I need to remember
Mary
that.
was bathing Jesus, and this family, these thieves took them in for the night, and their child, their baby at the time, Jesus was a baby, this child was a baby, and he had leprosy. And the wife, even though she didn't really know much about Jesus, she's like, if you just let me touch my child with the bath water of your baby. And Mary said, sure. And she did, and he was healed.
Yep.
And
that area now, is a healing area.
Yes.
That has produced miracles. So I just love it. We're just having so much fun.
Yes. Okay, so today he's on his ministry, guys. Remember, he's started his ministry now. So now Jesus is in Hebron.
Yeah, remember his ministry is only 3 years, and we did one and now we're doing another. So yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Jesus in Hebron, Dothain, and Nazareth. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. When Jesus arrived at Hebron, he left there his companions, saying that he was desirous of visiting a friend. Zachary and Elizabeth were no more.
That means they died.
Yeah. Jesus then went to the wilderness, which lay to the south of Hebron, between it and the Dead Sea, whither Elizabeth had taken the boy John. To reach it, one had to climb a mountain covered with white pebbles, and then cross a lovely valley of palm trees. I saw Jesus entering the wilderness and going into the cave to which John was first taken by Elizabeth. Then he crossed a little brook over which John also had passed. I saw him alone and in prayer, as if preparing for his teaching mission. When he left the desert, he went again to Hebron. I saw him as he journeyed, lending a helping hand everywhere along the road. At the Dead Sea, he helped some people who were on a kind of raft formed of beams and covered by an awning. On it were men, cattle, and merchandise. Jesus called to them and shoved a plank out to them from the shore. He helped them to land and stood by while they repaired their raft. They were at a loss as to who he was, for though there was nothing remarkable in his dress, yet his charming graciousness and dignity of bearing greatly impressed them. At first, they thought it must be John the Baptist, who had already made his appearance at the Jordan. But they soon discovered their mistake, for John's complexion was brown, much darker than that of Jesus, and his whole appearance rough. Jesus celebrated the Sabbath in Hebron, and there dismissed his traveling companions. He visited the sick in their homes, counseling and assisting them in every way. He raised them in his arms, carried them, and made their beds. But I did not see him curing anyone. To all, he appeared to be a benevolent, a wonderful person. He visited the possessed, and they grew calm in his presence, though as yet he drove no devil out. Wherever he went, he rendered aid when aid was needed. He raised the fallen. He refreshed the thirsty. He guided the traveler over bridge and brook. And all looked in astonishment upon the kind-hearted wayfarer. From Hebron, he went to the spot where the Jordan flows into the Dead Sea. Here he crossed the river in a boat and journeyed along its eastern bank to Galilee. I saw him traveling on between Pella and the country of Gergesa, making short journeys and helping all in need. He went to all the sick, even the lepers, consoling them, raising them in his arms, making their beds, exhorting them in prayer, and pointing out to the admiration of all that what treatment was necessary, what remedies to use in different cases.
Aww.
At one place, some people knew of the prophecies of Simeon and Anna, and they questioned him as to whether he was the one to whom they referred. It was a common thing for people to follow him from one place to another out of love. He inspired. The possessed were calm when near him. And
He went also to the rapid little stream that flows into the Jordan between the Sea of Galilee, the Hebron, not far from that steep mountain from which he subsequently cast the swine into the sea. Near the river stood a row of little mud huts like shepherds' huts, which were occupied by the men who were at that moment on shore laboring at their barks. They could not succeed in their work. I saw Jesus go up to them, make some suggestions in a friendly way, drag a beam to the spot, and put his hand to the work. He pointed out various expedients, and as he worked, exhorted them to patience and charity. After that, I saw Jesus in Dothain, a scattered little place northeast of Sepphoris, and in which there was a synagogue. The inhabitants were not bad, though very much neglected. Abraham had once owned fields there for his cattle intended for offerings. Joseph and his brethren used to guard their flocks in this same region, and it was here that the former was sold. Dothain at the time of our Lord was but a sparsely settled place, but its soil was good and its meadows extended down to the Sea of Galilee. It contained a large building like a madhouse in which many possessed lived. On Jesus' arrival, they became perfectly furious and dashed themselves almost to death. The keepers could not bind them. Jesus entered and spoke to them, and they became quite calm. He addressed to them a few more words, after which they quietly left the house and repaired to their several homes. The people were amazed at what they saw. They were unwilling for Jesus to depart, and one of them invited him to a marriage feast. I saw all the wedding ceremonies as at Cana. Jesus was like an honored stranger at the feast. He spoke wisely and graciously, giving the bride and groom good advice. Wow. He afterwards joined the disciples when Jesus appeared upon Thebes. When Jesus returned to Nazareth, he went around among his parents' acquaintances, but he was everywhere coldly received when he sought to enter the synagogue in order to teach. They turned him away. Then he repaired to the public marketplace and spoke of the Messiah to the crowd, of whom some Sadducees, others Pharisees. He told them that the Messiah would be different from what everyone's ideas pictured. Oh, see? John the Baptist he called the voice in the wilderness. Two youths clothed in long garments and wearing girdles like priests had followed Jesus from the country of Hebron, but they went not always with him. Jesus kept the Sabbath in Nazareth. After that, I saw Jesus and Mary Cleopas, and the parents of Pharmenus, as are in all about 20 persons leave Nazareth to go to Capernaum. They had with them asses laden with baggage. The house in Nazareth had been cleaned and adorned. It was so well arranged that with its rich hangings, it reminded me of a church. It was left unoccupied. The third husband of Mary Cleopas and some of her sons still carried on business in Anne's abode, and they took care of that house of the Holy Family. Mary Cleopas, with her youngest sons, Hoseas, Barnabas, and Simeon, dwelt at this time quite near to the small house not far from Capernaum, which Levi had fitted up for the Lord, and the parents of Parmenas, living at no great distance. Jesus journeyed again from place to place and appeared chiefly where John had been when he left the desert. He entered the synagogue and instructed. He consoled and relieved the sick. When he taught in the synagogue of a certain little town and spoke of John's baptism, of the coming of the Messiah, and of the penance, the people murmured. They mocked him. I heard some of them say, 3 months ago, his father, the carpenter, was still alive. Then he worked with him. Now he has traveled a little and back and comes to impart to us his wisdom. Jesus went also to Cana and taught. He had relatives there whom he visited. At this time, he was not yet accompanied by any of his future disciples. It looked as if he were studying men and building up upon the foundation that John had laid. Sometimes a good man accompanied him from place to place. Once I saw 4 men among them, some of his future disciples, on the high road between Samaria and Nazareth. They were in a shady place waiting for Jesus, who with one companion was coming that way. When he arrived in sight, they set forth to meet him. They told him that they had been baptized by John and that he had spoken of the near coming of the Messiah. He told them also of John's severe language toward the soldiers. only a few of whom he had baptized. Among other things, he had said that it would be better to take stones out of the Jordan and baptize them rather than such as they. I saw these disciples of John walking on with Jesus. Jesus then went along the Sea of Galilee toward the north. He spoke very plainly of the Messiah. In many places, the possessed cried after him. Out of one man, he drove a devil and taught in the schools. 6 men who were coming from the baptism of John met Jesus. Among them were Levi, known later as Matthew, and 2 sons of the widowed relatives of Elizabeth. They all knew Jesus through some relationship, others by hearsay, and they strongly suspected, though they had no assurance of it, that he was the one of whom John had spoken. They spoke of John of Nazareth and his sisters, especially Magdalene. They supposedly she had a devil, for she was already living apart from her family in the castle of Magdala. These people accompanied Jesus and were filled with astonishment at his discourse. The aspirants to baptism going from Galilee to John used to tell him all that they knew and heard of Jesus, while they that came from Aenon, where John baptized, used to tell Jesus all they knew of John. Jesus went alone to the sea, passing through a fence into an enclosed fishery where lay 5 ships. On the shore were several huts for the accommodation of the fishermen. Peter, the owner of this fishery, was in one of the huts with Andrew, John and James with their father Zebedee, and several others were on the boats. In the middle one was Peter's father-in-law with his 3 sons. I once knew all their names, but now I have forgotten them. The father was surnamed Zelotes, because he had gained his point in a dispute with the Romans concerning the right of navigation on the lake. There were about 30 men on the boats. Jesus went along the shore by the fenced-off way between the huts and the boats, speaking with Andrew and the others. I know not whether he spoke to Peter. They did not know him as yet. He spoke of John and of the near coming of the Messiah. Andrew was already a baptized disciple of John. Jesus told them that he would come to them again. So, this, it appears, is before he collected everyone, including Peter. Wasn't Peter the first one, Jeanette? Was he the first one that Jesus collected?
I think so.
Okay.
Because he found him
At the fishery.
Wasn't it Peter's? It was Peter's brother that told Peter about Jesus.
Oh, okay.
And it was him that awakened him, like, told him about,
Yeah.
there's this one. Now, Andrew, I don't think followed him yet, but he's the one that...
I think it just said he was baptized, though, didn't it? It just said that, what did it say, that Andrew was baptized? Well, anyway, we'll get there.
But Jesus gets baptized later. I looked through, I tried to find the baptism.
I know Jesus
I'm like, what's going on? When's he going to get baptized? But
yeah.
He'll get baptized later.
Yeah. So, what's interesting here on the very first, is it the very first page? Oh, okay, not yet. Okay, so he arrives in Hebron. Okay, here it is, the very first page. Zachary and Elizabeth were no more. You see, back then they didn't say they died, you know, they didn't talk like that. So that means his grandparents had died by the time he started his ministry. His grandparents had died. So that was interesting. Or wait, no,
Well, no,
not his
his uncle
grandparents,
and aunt.
not his grandparents, his uncle and aunt. I'm sorry. That
Yeah,
means that they died,
yeah.
John's
And
John's parents, and then they go to the place where Elizabeth had taken John the boy, because remember, uh Zachary had died first, and Elizabeth took him out to the wilderness, remember?
to live in the cave, yeah.
Yeah, it was, I think, the chapter before.
Yeah.
So it
She
was
would
just,
visit him often.
yeah, which was really interesting. She was preparing him. Like, it was like she knew, you know. Like she knew when Mary was pregnant, when she came. Um, in the mystery of the visitation, I always think the rosary, because that's my Bible on a string, you know. So in the joyful, the second mystery, she goes and she visits. She's excited to tell her she's pregnant, and she goes there to take care of her. And Elizabeth already knew, you know. So this is like, it puts it all together for me. Um, so then Jesus enters the wilderness, going to the cave where John was first taken by Elizabeth. He um she sees him alone in prayer, as if preparing his teaching mission. Because remember, he goes to Cana, then he does the miracle, then the proclamation, according to my rosary, my Bible on a string. That's when he begins his ministry after that first miracle. So he's actually right
It's like
now
he waited.
preparing.
It's like he had to wait and kind of like wait for the right time that God probably told him when the right time was. You know, when he found his disciples, when he would start his first one was at the wedding, right?
Yeah,
So I'm sure we'll hear about
he
that.
wasn't ready, and then he wasn't quite
Yeah.
ready, and Mary pushed him. You know how women are, they put a little pushy when someone needs something. Oh, I love it. Um, so here we are. When left in the desert, he went again to Hebron. She saw him helping everyone along the road. Could you imagine being along the road and Jesus comes to help you?
Wow.
How lucky they were to have encountered him. And then he helped some people on a raft filled with beams covered by an awning. um Men at cattle and merchandise, Jesus called to them and shoved a plank out to them from the shore. He helped them to land. Here they were drowning, you know, possibly drowning, and here he is, and stood by while they repaired their raft patiently. Jesus is so patient. They were at a loss of who he was. I guess they didn't know him. There was nothing remarkable about his dress. He looked like a you know, just a very charming, gracious, dignified young man. But he would greatly impress them. They're like, wow, you know what I mean? It wasn't his clothing, it was his graciousness and his dignity, which we are supposed to have. I just, it's just, you just get another part of him. We get it to see a little piece of Jesus's personality in just, not just in the stories that we've heard over and over. We get to see these little pieces and glimpses of him, just his kindness and his offering something, to just little things. He's like that in our lives. He helps us get a parking spot if we ask him. You know, we have to remember he's there with us every moment. Ask him, ask your guardian angel and the Holy Spirit. They're all there with us. All we have to do is ask them. They're omnipresent with us. So we have to, you know, we have to ask. So at first everyone's thinking, oh, he's so, magnetic that he must be John the Baptist, who had already made the appearance at the Jordan, like he had already, been there, but it was not the baptism, as Jeanette just said. They soon discovered their mistake, and then we learned something more about Jesus, that he was a lighter complexion than his cousin John, who was much darker. Now, John did live outdoors, and although Jesus, I'm sure, did more outdoor stuff as well, but his John was very rough, and Jesus was not as rough. He was soft and sweet and gracious and dignified. Like, John was sort of a mess. I kind of imagined as a wild man. So Jesus celebrated the Sabbath in Hebron. So that means that he would go, and Saturdays he was doing his Jewish duty, celebrating the Sabbath. And he dismissed his traveling companions. So maybe because he went to family and he couldn't bring them or whatever. But he visited the sick in their homes, consoling and assisting them in every way, which we're supposed to do. And I'm like, oh. In fact, I watched a movie the other day on Hulu, and it was called Meddling Mom or something like that. It was funny and cute, and she's a volunteer at the hospital, and I was like, oh, that is so nice. And she really helped this one woman, and it was just so beautiful. Anyway, he raised them in his arms and he carried them and made their beds, but I did not see him curing anyone. So here he is at the hospital helping people. Like, we never heard that before. This is the first time we're hearing that. And it just is so beautiful. I mean, he's helping people at the hospital. He's, and he's much lighter than we thought, Jeanette. Don't you just love that little piece of a detail? As John's more out there and kind of a messy wild man, Jesus is a little lighter, and and dignified. I mean, I love hearing these little details. So he's at the hospital. I can't hear you.
Even as a child, he was always so helpful and loving to everybody, that the mothers in the neighborhood would actually say, why can't you be more like Joseph's son? What can you remember?
What would Jesus do? Right? That's exactly what we'd say now. What would Jesus do?
Exactly.
But you have to watch that movie on Hulu, Meddling Mom. It's really cute. And she goes and volunteers in the hospital, and she helps this one woman. And it's such a cute little movie. You should go watch it. Okay. So he raises his arms and he makes their bed, doesn't cure anyone. He doesn't interfere at that. He's not doing his ministry is not yet officially started. But he appeared to be a benevolent and wonderful person. And we're supposed to be like him, Jeanette, right?
Yes.
Supposed to be Jesus to everyone. It's like, I don't know if I can be that wonderful. I'm very moody. He visited the possessed, and they grew calm in his presence, though as yet he drove no devil out. He wasn't ready yet. But then over here in the next page, it does say he did. But wherever he went, he rendered aid, and he raised the fallen, meaning he helped them get up. He refreshed the thirsty. He guided the traveler over the bridge and brook. They all took astonishment at the kind-hearted wayfarer. So everyone just looked at him like, wow. So then he goes to the Jordan, into the Dead Sea. I wish I was looking the other day saying, can we a map of all, like, he went 1 here, 2 here, 3 here. I mean, you could go through and do this. If you had a map, you could go and you could pin each place as she's saying here.
Well,
But
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
because if you look at the Bible, like at the Adventure Bible, it comes with like a nice timeline thing, and it kind of tells you everywhere in the Bible and where it's at in the actual um map. But this
Yeah.
is different. This is actual her visions and Jesus walking, and yeah, that's I mean,
I'd
if you
love
have
to
that, you
see,
can look.
but I would love to see, like, you know how Adventure Bible comes out with timelines? I
Hmm.
wish that they had a map timeline, like where they would put and it folds out and says this is this,
Or Anne's visions.
and including this, yeah, and including Anne's visions, yeah, and then including the Bible with it. You know what I mean? They could say Anne's visions are the blue dots, and you know what I mean, something like that, or the white dots or whatever. Anyway, so she sees him going here and there, places I haven't even heard of, Gergeza, um and then his arms making their beds, exhorting them to prayer. Can you imagine praying with Jesus, Jeanette?
Wow.
Prayer with Jesus right next to you in the flesh, like, wow. And pointing out to the admiration of all what treatment was necessary. So he would come in there and tell them in the hospitals or whatever, and everywhere he went, what treatments and what remedies to use in the different cases. Who would know better than Jesus to know this? So in a sense, he was doing some healing by pointing them, because being a doctor is a science. They come in and they look at I was a nurse, they look at the symptoms, and then as a nurse we come up with our own care plans, but then doctors come up with their care plans. Our care plans are different, where doctors' care plans include the medications and all, and ours include giving the medications that the doctors ordered as nurse care plans, but it's more about the actions that a nurse takes. So but what the doctors do is it's a science of guessing. So these doctors are guessing, well, what remedy should I try next? This isn't working. After so many weeks, they say, okay, this isn't working, let's try something different. Well, he points them to the direct thing that they should. So in a sense, he is already healing. So oh, Jeanette just sent me an article. I'm going to add it below. It's
I was looking to see if she has something on the internet about the timeline, and instead of that, I found this article that it says something about her body was incorrupt. And I'm
I
like,
didn't even know
whoa,
that.
I'm gonna have to look into that. Well, I'm gonna have to look into that. I didn't get a chance to read it yet, but
Yeah, okay, so I'll put it below what she's
that's
talking about.
interesting.
It is very interesting. So here he is kind of healing Jeanette, because when the doctor looks at everything,
He tells you what to do.
yeah, they don't have to guess. He tells them exactly where to go.
Yeah.
Who better to know than him?
Yeah, he's the one that made us.
Right? That's why, guys, prayer is so important, because God will, like, I knew when I needed my gallbladder out, and at the time I happened to be working with a doctor down there on 50. I was doing some day work in a detox, not a detox, it was something for addicted people. They would come in and see the doctor. So I was working with him somehow, I don't remember. So I asked him if he could, and I had Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time through my husband, and I asked him, could you write me an order for an ultrasound for my gallbladder? And I told him I had pain there, and he goes, yeah, it sounds like it. Like, I knew already what was wrong with me.
Well, you have the background from nursing also that helped you,
but yeah, I mean, but I didn't do digestive, I didn't do that. But anyway, so I knew, and I asked the doctor, and he wrote it, and yep, I need my gallbladder out. So it's just interesting. I didn't know that from nursing. Like, I don't remember being taught that. I just knew it's pain right between your shoulder blades. And I thought that feels like it's radiating from somewhere. Like I just, we know you don't have to be a nurse to know what's wrong with you. If you really tune in and pray, God tells us things, okay? And we intuitively know about our bodies. We just don't know we know. So we have to really sit and pray, and we'll learn. Okay, so anyway, um and then some people knew the prophecies of Simeon and Anna. I don't know what they're talking about here, the prophecies of Anna, Jeanette.
Of Simeon and Anna, when they prophesied about Jesus and how he was going to come and how he was going to change things, and then at the
Well, I
end,
know Simeon, but not
well, yeah,
Anna.
Anna also had them. Anna also
I
was
didn't
part of,
know. So
yeah, yeah,
I
Anna
don't
also
know.
had a lot of dreams and spent a lot of time
Oh,
at
dreams,
church,
right.
because remember she
Okay.
died, her husband died, and she was a widow. And after her husband died, I guess she had a little bit of money, and she stayed the rest of her life at church. And
Okay.
she would be at the church day and night
I
praying,
vaguely remember.
awaiting Jesus to come. And I guess that's where he saw Simeon, and they were there together doing it.
So were they like uh friends or whatever, Anna and Simeon?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember reading anything like that, but I could
I just
imagine,
now I vaguely remember a
if
little
they're
hearing
together
Anna.
at the same parish, praying day after day after day,
They
waiting
have
for the
to know each other.
child, that who told them about the child? It must
Right.
have been a messenger. It must have
God.
been an
Yeah.
angel,
I
you know.
remember hearing Anna the prophetess, and then I vaguely remember that Anna the prophetess. Anyway, see, I remember words. I'm a word person. Anyway, um, so then here they knew about those, and they were asking him, were you the child they were referring to? So people were starting to pick up clues, they're like, he's so wonderful. What is he, that one? Remember those people are trying to put this together. So I find that interesting. So it was common for people to follow him. He had this like the Hollywood,
Charisma.
yeah,
Yeah,
that charisma, as Hollywood stars have this charisma. He had this, and he
yeah.
gathered people like, you know, and he would inspire this love, it says, and then the possessed were calmed. The demons probably said, "Okay, we got to get out of here. We'll be back later," when he leaves. Right, right. The
Yep,
demons don't want to be
yep.
around him.
Oh yeah,
They
no.
flee. So so then he goes to the Jordan, and uh their people are laboring and they couldn't succeed, and Jesus goes up to them and makes suggestions, drags a beam to the spot, puts his hand to work, points out various expedients, tells them, says, in patience and charity, he kindly explains to them, do it this way, I think this will work. He just wants to help everybody, and people building a house, people in the hospital.
He was
Just
loving, he was caring,
oh
he cared about everybody, everything, always, how could you not love a person like that? How could you not want to be around that kind of
So
love,
followers are
of
seeing
love?
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and his followers are seeing this. And it's just, we're supposed to be like that, Jeanette.
Yes,
I don't think I
we
can.
are.
I don't think
We
I
are.
can. I'm
Yes, you
trying.
can. Yes, we can. We
I
just,
don't
if
know.
we
So
stay more in the
good.
spirit, if we stay more in the spirit and around God's love, with prayer and with readings and with masses and churches
But
and
I
with
don't like to leave
everything,
my house.
if we if we if we stay more in that kind of a mindset, when we go out in the world, we'll stay with it as much as possible.
True.
That's why it's good to have a
Prayer is
routine.
important.
It's
Yes.
good to have a routine, to
Yes.
remember, you wake up, you pray, then you
Yes.
start your day. Then you
Yes.
take a break at 3
That's
or
it.
whenever, you pray, and then you keep going. And then at night, you remember to stop, to take time to pray.
Yes.
We have
You
to,
give
because
God your first fruits in the morning
yes,
too.
because if you don't do that, then it's so easy to let the world carry you away again.
Yes.
We are creatures of habit. We're creatures
Yes.
of, okay, we're out there. Oh, how nice this is. Oh, I want to be like this. I want to do this.
Yes.
And we go away. Like,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, it's so important to come back to what's important.
Yes. So then that he goes off again to Dothain, northeast of Sepphoris, into a synagogue. The inhabitants were not bad, but were very much neglected. Abraham had once owned those fields. Joseph, so he's walking on the fields of his forefathers. I
Yes.
mean, just beautiful. And it wasn't a very settled place. I guess it didn't grow like that because, you know, whatever. And there was a large building like a madhouse, which many possessed lived. Ooh. You'll find that certain neighborhoods or whatever, there's a lot of evil in one area. So
And there's this one place near us. What's it called? It's where they have all the psychics and stuff, and everybody gets drawn to that area.
Casadega.
Yes, I've never been there, but
My
everybody's
mother used to go.
like,
And
you're
I
like
said,
drawn to that, you know, you're like,
my mother
oh,
used to go, and my mom had this draw because my mom was extraordinarily psychic. But I used to tell her, she even had me, I even went there with her a couple of times
oh,
because
that
she
scares me. That stuff
she
scares
kept,
me.
that is such evil. And you
That
know, there was
scares
a
me.
lot of evil that came into our lives, and I believe it was from that. I really do. If you go near that, like, I look at astrology personalities, but not future telling, because the Bible specifically tells us. And I'm like, Mom, we shouldn't. She goes, well, you know, and I'm like, oh, I wish my mom could have really like. And my mom also with the yoga, which I'm very drawn to, because remember, my mom was a yoga teacher. So my mom was also a Catholic. She went to mass every Sunday. She did her, you know, her prayers. She did the rosary. Like, she didn't do the rosary every day until the more end of her life, not while she was going to this. My mom ended up with a really bad pain, and she just would do anything to get out of it. And so I think that's what drew her to this kind of stuff. That's what drew her to yoga. So
well, remember Saul and the story? Remember the story how Saul at the end of his time when David was, and he was very jealous of David, and he went and looked at a fortune teller. He went and he wanted to, yeah, and then he asked, I think it was when his son and David were very close. It was what was his son's name? His son's name started with a J. I can't remember right now. But anyway, Saul was a king, and this was the guy, you know, this was at the time when David came in the picture young, and he killed Goliath, and then he was like, oh, you know, David. And later on, Saul started becoming very jealous of David.
right.
And then David had to run away and hide for a while. And
Yeah, but I remember that, but I had never, I don't remember anything about astrology.
At the end, Saul wanted to know what was going on, and he was a little crazy, and he went in a cave, and he asked one of the fortune tellers there, I don't know what they called them back then, but he asked them, please, seers or whatever they called them. He asked them, please, can you talk to Elijah for me? I want to know what's going on. And so she did. She went and she called on him, and he showed up to Saul. And he said, what are you doing? You know you're not supposed to be doing this. You know it's not allowed.
I don't remember that story. Wow.
Yes. And then he says, well, you know, you want to know what's going on? You're dying tomorrow. And so is your son, or something like that.
I don't remember
You're
that.
not supposed to know. And so he was so distraught, he stopped eating. He
Wow.
stopped eating, and they were
Oh,
making him eat. Do you remember now?
oh, I remember him stop eating, but I didn't
Okay.
realize it was from astrology.
The reason, because he went to find out what was going on, because he was desperate, wanted to know
Oh,
what to do,
wow.
because God stopped talking to him because he was
Wow.
being bad, and God stopped talking to him, so he was like estranged from
Wow.
God. And when you are estranged from God, man, that's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. You think death is bad? You don't want to be estranged from God. That's hard.
That's what I tell my kids all the time. And what
And that's what
happens? Our
happened to him.
sin blocks us from him. We can't see him because of our sin.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sorry.
Wow.
I
Oh, I'm
went
so glad
off.
you brought
I
that
went
up.
off.
No, you didn't. No, that was important to know. No,
Yeah.
I'm glad that
Yeah.
you did that. Okay, so um he addressed them a few more words, after which they quietly left the house and repaired their stuff. Oh, okay. So wait a minute. On Jesus' arrival, they became perfectly furious. You know, a lot of times people that have anger issues, we know it's coming from Satan, which I've had anger issues. I know it was coming from Satan. And they dash themselves, these possessed people dash themselves to death. Let me tell you something. When you become furious, that's Satan acting in you. Just remember that. I know it.
Remember that movie we
I
just
have it.
saw? Remember Nefarious, that movie?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that really scared me a little bit, but
I
it's
know someone
true.
right
It
now.
happens. It's true. It was a true story.
I know someone right now. You know, the more negative people you're around that are possessed like that and that have sick uh sick perversions and things like that, the more that you carry that, when you interact intimately with someone, you carry their demons with you. You know, if you have a lot of sex with a lot of different people, you will carry their demons with you. It is literal possession.
Yeah, there's an Argentine saying, well, a Spanish saying, my mom would always tell me who you hang around with and I'll tell you who you are. Tell
That's
me who
right.
you're around with a lot and I'll tell you who you are. You're like, no, that's not true. That's not true. That's
No,
why
it
we got to
is.
be very careful, because sometimes we want to help and
Right.
we get put in situations, and sometimes it's really hard to get out of it and
Yes.
to help, and you end up
You,
becoming a little bit of the problem that
yep.
they're having. So you got to be very careful, because you can do a little, but you can't give yourself too much.
Yeah, you have to keep your
You got
distance. You
It's
can maybe
hard. It's
say
hard.
a word or so, but then
Yes,
get away. Don't
it's
get
hard.
involved.
Yeah,
Yeah. You got
that's
to
why you
stay
need
away
prayer.
from people, you know, that have a lot, they're carrying a lot of demons. But that's why they say Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, which she wasn't, which the popes cleared up later, but she was a sexually a person who had a lot of sex with a lot of different men. So the keepers could not bind them. So I don't know exactly what that means, but Jesus' arrival, they became furious. The keepers could not bind them. I don't know what that means, but Jesus entered and spoke to them. They became quite calm because their demons ran away. He
Well,
addressed.
I think the keepers are the people in charge. The keepers
Okay.
couldn't bind them, so I guess the people in charge
They
couldn't.
still wanted to be around Jesus, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. He addressed to them a few more words, after which they quietly left the house and repaired to their several homes. So these people were still drawn to him, and when we are Christ to others, a lot of times they're drawn to see what they can get from you. Remember that. Um, and and the keepers probably were trying to pull them back, maybe, like, if you're right, and they couldn't hold them, because so this is the little way he said a few words to them and then departed from them, it seems. So the
What
people
is the
were,
saying? What is the saying in the Bible? Be be innocent like the dove, but wise like the serpent, or something
no,
like that.
carry the the stick. Wise, Innocent as a dove, but wise as a serpent. Yeah. Wait a minute.
Yeah, that's it.
Wait a minute. No, let me make sure.
Anyway, but I
No,
like
no,
that
it's
saying. Because
innocent.
we have to be
No.
innocent and loving, but we got to at the same time be wise and bold and be able to fight if we have to, but with
And
a
what
loving
be
way.
innocent as a dove and wise as a serpent. Yes.
Yeah.
It's Matthew 10:16.
Yes.
So the people were amazed. I mean, who wouldn't be amazed? They were unwilling for Jesus to depart. They're begging him to stay, this amazing person. Who wouldn't, you know? One of them invited him to a marriage feast. That's the only other marriage he went to another wedding before he went to the Cana that we hear about. Like, I'm sure he went to other weddings, but to
Oh,
hear this,
yeah.
I'm sure, but to hear this is just beautiful, to hear these little tidbits of his life. And he spoke graciously. He was giving advice. You know how you give advice to like we're doing the quilt for your daughter. Um, and you know how people, when they do a video, they pass the mic and say, you know, while everyone's partying, they say, okay, the videographer comes and says, so what advice do you give the bride and groom? And everyone will say something funny or cute, and they'll give their advice. You know, sometimes people aren't real good at giving advice, so they don't know what to say, so they say something funny, you know.
Yeah.
But so he gives them wise and gracious advice. I love it. After, of course, they didn't have mics back then or videographers, but you know, I guess they stand up at the table and they give them advice.
Oh, yeah.
So afterwards they joined the disciples when Jesus appeared. I guess his friends didn't go to that wedding with him, or maybe, but they just don't mention it. So then he returns to Nazareth. And he went around his parents' acquaintances, but he was everywhere, coldly received. When, remember, there's a saying, you can't be a hero in your own hometown. That's what happens to him. When, remember, they say that's Joseph's son. You know, what do you mean he's all Mr. Know Everything? So he wanted to enter the synagogue in order to teach, because he's getting ready to go out on his mission, his 3-year mission. And they're like, what? No, you can't. And some of whom were Sadducees and Pharisees. They're like, you know, they told him the Messiah would be, then he tells them the Messiah will be different for what others' ideas.
Yeah, they thought he was going to come down and start fighting and as a king and with gold but I mean, wasn't he described in the Old Testament?
Yeah, but that's not
I
the
can't
real
understand why they don't
value.
know.
The gold in this world, that I love gold, but it's of no value for real. That's why I don't care that I don't have a big old house. I like my little tiny condo. It's near Whole Foods. It's near the church. I mean, I'm just near everything. And my kids are always trying to get me to move where they are. I'm like, what? You know, I have everything I need. The hospitals around you suck. You know, things like that. So I'm like, I have a teeny tiny, I have a little too much, which I'm trying to get rid of. But it's like, you know, we don't need a lot in this world. We don't need to worry about, you know, a fancy house and all that crap. Anyway, so John the Baptist, he called the voice in the wilderness, the voice, which we always think of the voice in the wilderness as, I always think about when God was, you know, when he was baptizing him in the Jordan, and God says, this is my son, listen to him. I always think that's the voice. This is the voice that they're talking about.
Well, if you think about it, that's pretty much where John was really raised, in the wilderness. He was
Right.
raised in a cave.
So
He was
that's
raised
why it fits.
eating locusts and, you know,
Honey.
and making his own clothes, and you know, he was raised. So he is a voice in the wilderness. I think of
Right.
John when they say that. Yeah.
Yeah, but the bug thing. Um, the two
Maybe they're
youths.
tasty. I never had one.
I don't know. Maybe they're like kimchi. I don't know.
I'd rather eat that than pork. Let me tell you, I'd rather eat a bug than pork. Ugh.
Ew, I love pork.
I don't eat meat. I don't eat
I
meat. So
know, but I
that's
love
why
pork.
I'd rather eat dirt or a piece of tree bark.
I love pork. Um, I don't eat it anymore though because of the spirochetes. But anyway, I love it. But I do have bacon now and then. But very, very infrequent, maybe every 6 months. Two youths clothed in long garments wearing girdles like priests would follow Jesus, but they weren't always with him. He kept the Sabbath at Nazareth. That was his home, and he wanted to go home for mass. I thought that was nice. Well, for church or whatever. After that, I saw Jesus and Mary Clopas. So everyone comes, and 20 people leave Nazareth and go to Capernaum. Isn't it? Maybe this is one of the feasts before the first covenant, which I sent you from my silent retreat. I sent you a link to that. You need to go listen. It's the covenants and then all the feasts of the old covenant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you got to hear it.
Yeah, that's something I gotta
I'll resend you the links.
into, because there's a lot of different ones.
It was my silent retreat. Everyone's like, I thought it was going to be all about angels. There was only one lecture about angels. It was all about the covenant and then the feasts of the old covenant.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he taught so much, Jeanette. You got to listen.
Wow.
I'm re-listening again. So that's why my computer's full right now. I put them up for you guys. So the house in Nazareth, if you're listening to this and you want links to those, send me an email at Mama Hen's Catholic Teaching at gmail.com. It'll be below the email. Send it to me. Say, I want copies of your silent retreat. You'll only know that if you're listening here. So the house in Nazareth has been cleaned and adorned. It was so well arranged with its rich hangings. It reminded me of a church. Like Mother Angelica said, why shouldn't God's house be beautiful? When Protestants accuse us of making things beautiful, well, why shouldn't God's house be
That's what
beautiful?
heaven's going to be like.
Yep.
If you read in Revelation, all the jewels and the stones and the beauty and the unimaginable beauty.
But it's not diamonds. It's not diamonds.
No, they're
Did you see that video that I sent about the jewels in Revelations? The jewels in Revelations are the ones that are in heaven, not some of the ones like rubies, like the ones that we think now are valuable, like diamonds. They're not in heaven. Go and look at in Revelations. It tells you. I have a little video of it. Jeanette, I sent it to you.
Yeah, sometimes I don't have time to see everything.
You gotta listen to it. I've been
recuperating from my
I know. That's what we haven't been on as much. Yeah, we haven't been on as much because Jeanette had some things. Her daughters have been traveling, so she had to go to airports and things like that. So
yeah, and then I had to go wedding dress shopping, and I had surgery in my nose, and
so we're behind schedule, but we're going to start doing it twice a week. Every now and then we won't do it on a Monday or two, but really we're trying to stick to it because, like tomorrow I have my oil change, little things like that. So anyway, okay, so let's focus. Let's get this over. Not over in a bad way. This is good stuff. We need to study it.
We all know it. What we're talking about.
But this is so important. The third husband, Mary Cleopas, the sons are still carried on business in Anne's abode. So I guess Anne's place, who is still alive. I was thinking Anne when it said Elizabeth and Zachary, but Anne's still alive, I guess. They took her. No, is she? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think she is. Okay. So they took care of the house of the Holy Family. Mary Cleopas with her youngest sons. These become followers of Christ. Barnabas and Simeon.
See Joseph, Simeon, all those were all sons of Mary Cleopas.
Yeah.
And those I believe are some of the ones that they were saying were his brothers.
Right.
And they're very close. They were close cousins. Yeah. So in the translation, brethren means family. It does not necessarily mean brothers.
Right.
And that's where it came that people were saying, oh, he had brothers, Mary had other children. No, she did not.
No. And the church, the church, They have theologians studying this, and they said they are not brothers. So, okay, so here we come to the part that he enters synagogue and instructs. I guess someone led him, because where John had been left, he left the desert, and he goes into other synagogues, and he's teaching, and they're mocking him, saying 3 months ago his father, the carpenter, was still alive. So
Yeah.
3 months ago Joseph was still alive before he started getting ready to be on his mission, because Joseph wouldn't have let them go after him. So that's why he was gone by the time he starts his mission. And they're like, now he traveled a little and back, and he comes to impart knowledge to us, his wisdom, like they're making fun of him. And Jesus goes to Cana and taught there. He had relatives who he visited. At this time, he's not yet accompanied by his future disciples yet. It looked as if he were studying men and building up on the foundation that John had laid. So sometimes a good man accompanied him from place to place. I don't know who this good man is. And then once he saw 4 men among them, some of his future disciples. So she saw 4 men among him at future disciples on different times, between Samaria and Nazareth. They were in a shady place waiting for Jesus, and that one companion, whoever he was. And when they arrived, they set forth to meet him. They told him that they had been baptized by John. So right there, that's the opening to the door. And he had been spoken, the coming of the Messiah. They told him also of John's severe language toward the soldiers, who he said would have been better to take the stones out, that they were hard as a stone. That means their hearts were so hard he couldn't break through even with baptism, because they wouldn't open their hearts. We can get the sacraments, but we can close our heart with our sin. Those soldiers were sinful, so they couldn't open their hearts. So anyway, so then Jesus goes along the sea toward the north. He spoke very plainly about the Messiah. He's trying to prepare them. The Messiah is coming. This is part of his, getting the ground and fertilizing. He's throwing fertilizer on the ground. Jeanette, you're a gardener. So, and then listen to this, Jeanette. He does, one man he drove a devil out of. There you go. One, in many places the possessed cried after him. Out of one man he drove a devil. I think that's somewhere in the Bible.
Maybe that was one faithful man. Maybe his faith was strong. Maybe, I don't know, but that's, it's really hard to.
I remember hearing about one man before he started his ministry, though, somewhere. I don't know if it was here, but I remember hearing, because I didn't read this yet. So, but I remember hearing that he had driven one man before. So, and he taught in schools. 6 men were coming from the baptism of John, met Jesus. People that were baptized heard the call because they already had the Holy Spirit from being baptized. Remember the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Remember, knowledge, each of those gifts. I'll put something below with that. Among them were Levi, known later as Matthew, the 2 sons of the widowed relatives of Elizabeth. They all knew Jesus through some relationship, others by hearsay. They strongly suspected, though they had no assurance, that he was the one that John spoke of. Because remember, when John baptized him, he said, the Lamb of God. That's the first thing he said when he saw Jesus. So people had an inkling because they remember John saying that.
Oh gosh, guys, just wait until you see her vision of baptism. It's the most beautiful vision of all. It's one of my favorites.
You're right ahead, bad girl.
One of my favorites. No. I have a rosary book on all the mysteries of the rosary with her visions.
You sent me that.
And I read it. I sometimes do the rosary with that book. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes. Oh, so then they spoke of John, Lazarus, and his sisters. Remember Mary and Martha, especially of Magdalene. Spoke of Mary of Magdalene. They supposed she had been a devil, for she was already living apart from her family in the castle of Magdala. Remember, she had that rich biological family member that left her that castle. And that's why she was called Mary of Magdala. And she had sex with many, and she was rich because of that, not because of prostitution. These men accompanied Jesus and were filled with astonishment. They were like, what? The aspirants to baptism going from Galilee, John used to tell them that all that he knew and heard of Jesus while they came from Anon and Jesus baptized, used to tell Jesus they all knew of John. Jesus went to the sea, passing through a fence that enclosed the fishery where their life. Remember, he's around these fishes where he calls Peter. So he's going around there. So maybe he's getting ready to call Peter now. On the shore, there were several huts for accommodation of the fishermen, and Peter was the owner of one of this. So Andrew, John, James, all these who become his disciples, he's around all of them. He's throwing fertilizer. And I once knew all their names, but I've forgotten them. The father, Zelotes, Zelotes, and there was a point in a dispute with the Romans concerning the right of navigation on the light. Oh, there are about 30 men on the boat. Jesus went along speaking with Andrew and the others. So Andrew, remember you said he came through Andrew first.
Yeah,
I
Andrew
know.
was the first one, and
Yep.
also if you guys watch The Chosen, I know that it's not completely a Catholic show, but it's amazing because you really get to see, like, with your eyes also how Andrew was the first one and how Peter was naughty at first. Because Peter he was fishing on the Sabbath. He was doing things he shouldn't have been
So
doing.
remember, he chooses him as the leader. People that think, oh, I could never be because I've done things wrong. No,
Oh no, guys,
Jesus,
we're okay.
Jesus takes, no, but he takes the people that are the worst and he can turn them into the best. So just remember that. You may not get accolades for here on earth, but people can change, and people, that is what conversion is about. So when Jesus steps in, he can convert the worst sinner. So don't think, oh, I could never be. He can convert anybody. So he's conversing with Andrew, and she knows not whether he spoke with Peter. Well, he didn't, according to what we know. Sorry, it's divine mercy. I know not whether he spoke to Peter. She didn't know if he had known him yet. Like Jeanette said, it was Andrew. He spoke of John, of the near coming of the Messiah, and Andrew was already baptized disciple of John.
Yeah, because
And
Andrew
Jesus,
started with John, but then John told Andrew about Jesus, so he went in to inquire more about Jesus. He was interested, and that's how he told Peter about Jesus.
And so Andrew was already a baptized disciple. So he's telling. And then Jesus told them he would come to them again. And tomorrow, guys, he goes over to another place, and this looks exciting. So make sure, not tomorrow, Friday, make sure you come back because it's going to be exciting. So we are going to see you guys on Friday. We hope you got as much out of this as we did, and we're glad we got to share it with you. And thank you for joining us.
And if you guys have time, it's 3:00 now. I know that you're probably listening to it at a different time, but as you heard our alarms go off at 3, we take 10 minutes. It just takes 10, 15 minutes.
That's it.
To pray the divine mercy. And I do it on a beautiful website that's called divinemercy.org. It's the Marian Fathers Alar, and he does it live. He does it live in the shrine of divine mercy, and it's 10, 15 minutes. And you can even do stuff while you're listening. You can do the dishes, whatever, just listen to it.
Father Chris Alar has a thing out of why the Divine Mercy is one of the most important devotions. And by devotions, we mean you just do it every day. But listen, there's also on YouTube, you can put Divine Mercy in song. It's a beautiful song, which you should pray at every dying person's bedside, because that's when Satan's coming. It's important to have it at bedside of someone who's dying. My mother insisted it, and I didn't know as much before. She told me, but I didn't know as much.
Yes.
But it's a beautiful, just put Divine Mercy in song. and listen to it. It's you can
And
listen
why?
every 3 o'clock.
And why 3 o'clock? Because that's the time that Jesus died.
That's right.
And if you don't have time to do it at 3 o'clock, you can do it anytime. You can do it later.
Right.
Actually, last time I went to confession, Father gave me as penance, pray the Divine Mercy. So I did. I just stayed there in at church and pray the Divine Mercy. So you can do it at any time, but if you can stop for 10 minutes at 3 o'clock, it's so special. Because that's when he died. Bye, guys.
Bye. Okay, Mama. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.